Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's Q&A from the family support team at the St. Louis Arc. Today is a really important topic on doing emergency planning, just in case something happens to you and you are in a caregiving role. So with me today is Marianne Tolliver, who I'll have introduce herself shortly.
As Sharon said, I'm Marianne Tolliver, and I am the director at the St. Louis Arc of our Aging Services and Residential Navigation. I also help facilitate our aging caregiver support group and help facilitate the Planning Forward group. In addition to that, I have a brother with a disability who's 68 years of age, who lives with my other brother, and we spend quite a bit of time together doing a lot of social activities.
I'm going to open up the
That's me.
presentation. While I'm doing that, Marianne, tell me what residential navigation means.
So residential navigation means that if you are a person who has a comprehensive waiver and you are interested in moving forward with your family member moving into services with the St. Louis Arc, I work with you, the residential team, in creating a transition plan along with your support coordinator, whether it's from DMH or through CHS, Center for Human Services, and make sure that a transition is set up for a successful move for your family member and for you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think sometimes
So,
families are confused about whether they should be chatting with you or not. All right, I'm going to turn it over to you to get us started.
All right, so we are moving right into creating an emergency plan. So this caregiver path, so this is for you. And if something would happen to you, whether it's a healthcare emergency or something else, that you would kind of have a plan already put together. And that plan would be spelling out what to do if you're suddenly unable to care for your family member, including how to contact your backup supports. And obviously you want to have those backup supports identified and talking to those people first, organizing critical information and preparing everyone for the unexpected. So what does that mean? What could look like is an emergency card for your wallet, one for you and one for your family member, so that all that information is laid out in case something happens to both of you and you're not able to provide that information to the first responders. Within that list, you also want to identify who your contacts would be, whether it's a family member, a friend, or let's say that your family member lives in a home not with you and receives supports from an agency, that they would be identified also, because they would have more information regarding your family member as well. So
can we talk a little bit more in detail about each of those? The first question you have is, what do you mean by an emergency card for your wallet? Is there something that's pre-prepared, or should people just make a card that says in case of emergency and kind of outline things that they might need?
So there are cards that are available, and or you can make one. And that information would include your emergency contacts, your name, full name, address, your date of birth, who your emergency contacts are, with their home number or their cell phone number, whichever is best for them, and their address, and what the relationship is to you. Potentially your blood type, your doctor's name and telephone number, in the hospital of your preference. But if it's an emergency, you're going to go to the closest hospital to you anyway. And any other special information that would be important for the first responders to know. That could include also your medication what the dosage is and the frequency of the medications. If you had any recent surgeries, you could put that on there, the date of those surgeries that are important. And if it's important, for you to put in what your religious practices are, if you have a living will on file, and a healthcare proxy on file. In addition to any medical conditions that you have, allergies is a really important thing to be known, and your medical insurance with the company and the policy number.
I think there's kind of two parts to this, and that's what makes it complicated for Mary Ann and I to talk about it, is that there's the things that your emergency responders will need to take care of you. And then there's the things that your emergency responders will need to know so that if you aren't going to be home to meet your family member who needs help, that they realize that there's something else there. So there's something called a carer's ID card that says specifically on it, I look after someone who depends on me for care in an emergency call, blah, 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 blah. Those are the kinds of things that you might want to either have a separate card or at the top of your emergency card, have a sentence that says, I am a caregiver. Please reach out to this person to ensure that my family member is safe. So I think it's good for you to think about this when you have your annual medical appointments, that there's a choice for you to be able to release some of your medical information. That might be a place to be able to say, I have an emergency support team, and if something happens to me medically, I want to include this information there. So you may not want everybody on your team to have all your confidential medical information, but talk to your doctor about whether there's a way to indicate in your records that they keep online that there's another way to, that there's something else that may need to be taken care of.
So building an emergency care team, that team are going to be people that you trust, people who that will be there to help out, people who know you and your family member pretty well, so that you have several people who could respond should an emergency come up.
We have a question about what to do if you don't have anyone to be an emergency contact. And if you truly don't think you have anybody, then that's where I believe you should start with this project, is really doing some deep diving into your relationships and your family members' relationships, because it can be really difficult if you have a very small family, or if it's just you and the person with a disability. You could feel all alone out there, but everybody needs to have at least one person that they can call on. And you're not asking somebody to take your caregiver or take your family member's suitcase and move in with you. All you're asking them is that if something happened to you, can they be the point of contact to activate an emergency care team? So you may have a neighbor that's willing to do that for you, but then the neighbor has phone numbers for the case manager, for any services your family members involved with, for a respite provider. So I think that's kind of a crucial part of building a team when you feel like you don't have anybody. And sometimes I think you can look within our own community. I think we've had people in our support groups that have said, I'll do this piece for you if you'll do it for me. Because again, how much you dole out to each person on the team can be very specific. I will give one example from one of our families who was probably the first person I really worked with this on. And she and her son were both really engaged in their church. And he actually had some members of the church that he had some social time that he spent with them. But mom was really concerned about asking them to do more. It seemed really uncomfortable. And where we started was just to have a meeting with these 3 or 4 members of the church to say, hey, it's just the 2 of us out there. I want you to know about our situation just in case something happens to me. And what unfolded was the individual church members all were able to reach out and say, here's where I feel like I really want to take part in this, or I'd be interested in this, but I feel uncomfortable. I need more information. So sometimes I think it's figuring out how to have an opening into a conversation. Maybe you're not saying, I want to ask you to do this, but you're saying, I want you to get to know me and my child, me and my sister or brother, because I want to make sure that I'm not the only one that knows what's going on over here.
So as you are bringing those people together, as you identify them, you want to make sure that you discuss your plan with them. And that plan could include lots of different things. And that would be reaching out to extended family and support networks, and ensuring that they have an understanding of what your family member daily routine is, such as maybe during the day, your son, daughter, brother, or sister might go to a day program. They might work at a sheltered workshop or employed in competitive employment, and having the times that they start and finish, how they get home, and the telephone numbers of those entities so they can be contacted, and a plan can be set, knowing what would happen next if you're not able to pick them up or receive them, be there when they get home if they can't get in by themselves. The other piece there is, let's say your family member has a key, they can go in and get back into the house by themselves, they can spend time. But if you wouldn't come home within a time that you normally would, what would they do? Do they have a list of what maybe they should do to be able to make a call? Maybe calling you, calling some other friend, family member, so that they have a plan too, so that they don't get anxious and they know what they should be doing.
And I think sometimes families get concerned about, I've had a number of families say, I really don't want them to use 911 because they'll call all the time, and because they want to be able to talk to the emergency team. There are a lot of ways to help your family members be able to reach out. You can pre-program a few people's numbers into an Alexa or a Google Home so they can say, call Sandy, and it'll call them. You can have them have the direct line to the police department near you so they can still get emergency responder there, but don't call the 911 system. So there's a lot of ways to tackle that, to kind of get that ball rolling. I think that was a great comment, Marianne. I think sometimes families get nervous that their family member is going to be afraid if they start this conversation. But Marianne, I know you've had many conversations with people that we support, and they're already thinking about some of these things. And sometimes it's just nice to talk about them.
Yeah, I think it really takes away their anxiety of what they will do should something happen, because they're very aware and very cognizant of what routines are, and if it's not happening, knowing what to do if it's not continuing as it normally does is really important. Sharon, did you want to talk a little bit about the letter of intent?
Sure. So when Marianne does the planning forward groups, when we work with families about bigger planning, sometimes we'll suggest a letter of intent. And I wanted to show you all this document. It's available at the Center for Future Planning for the National Arc of the United States. And a couple of the pre-submitted questions were about, if this is going to replace a special needs trust or a will, and absolutely not. Really, we're just trying to have you think about what would happen if you were in a car accident and you couldn't get home. You know, if you needed to be in the hospital for a couple days or something else happened, what would be the pieces that would need to be in place for everybody to be safe and comfortable? So this letter of intent is a pretty long document, but if you go to part 3 of it, sorry, I'm trying to not to make you dizzy, but part 3, which is page 7, gets into some of that basic information about what your family members' routines might be like. So if that seems daunting to you, you can use this form to just walk through what are the basic likes and dislikes, what happens every day of the week. You know, without this form, I might forget that on Friday night, there's a sibling phone call that happens, or that there's a trip to McDonald's on Saturday that's non-negotiable. So making sure you kind of put those things in writing can be really helpful. This kind of walks through the skill set the person has, what can they do for themselves, and where can they use a little bit more help. This will be great because then somebody can come in and know that they don't have to do every bit of the chores, that the person can, you know, make their own breakfast or clean up their dishes, whatever it might be that they can handle on their own. There's dates. All the information here can be included for jobs and not and job coaches. So let's say somebody works at the grocery store, you could have information for the grocery store here, but also the name of the job coach that's there to provide them support. Because if they keep going to their job and you're not at home, they're likely to be pretty stressed out and they may need a little extra support. Same kind of thing for the day program. So you can see as you go through this, it spells those things out. Part 4 is about how decisions are made for this person. So this might seem overkill, and it may be if you're only gone for 1 or 2 nights, but if something happened and you were gone for a little bit longer, there's information about legal supports that are in place, healthcare information. So you can fill out as much or as little of this form as you like, but it's a great tool. And once you have it filled out, it can be attached to your will, kept in your files, and be available for a more long-term plan.
So that kind of leads right into our next slide, Sharon. Creating an emergency care document file, which it could be either in a file folder, it could be in a big envelope that you keep with you, and copies of important papers, such if you have POA information on yourself as well as with your family member, and financial POA, that those documents are included in there, and or I think guardianship papers would probably be important too. If you have a will, at least who to contact to be able to get access to that will, should it be important, and HIPAA authorization. If I guess, Sharon, there's probably papers out there that they can get online for HIPAA authorization that could be filled out. And then they know exactly too who to be able to contact with any information regarding your care or your family member's care. That current medication list that we talked about earlier, and a list of service providers, which Sharon just mentioned, that you're currently using. Name, phone number, email, schedule, especially if it's a routine schedule, will be helpful for supporting your family member. 2, I think, in making those plans of what would happen if you're going to be hospitalized, if you would be using some type of in-home respite, or going to a respite facility such as Oak Tree, that's run by UCP, would be to maybe even go and visit that place so that your family member knows that, hey, should something happen to me, this could be a place that I might be going to, and it takes the unknown factor away from what that place looks like.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Oak Tree. I want to make sure people know what that is. So here at the ARC, we offer home-based respite services where you can hire somebody that you choose to come into your home or for your family member to go to their home. But there's also facility-based respite provided by UCP Heartland, and that's at Oak Tree, which is in Webster Groves. It's a 4-bedroom house where you can get short-term out-of-home respite. So you can use that for a vacation. You don't have to wait for something terrible to happen to you, but it is really nice to have that as a backup. And I agree with Marianne, at least going to visit it and meeting the people that run it would be really great. But you might also want to just schedule a weekend there for your family member when you're feeling great so that they can have that experience and know what that's like in case they need to go. So it is a fairly limited number of rooms that are available there, but it's a nice place and a good option for people. Or if you've got a respite provider that would do an overnight, that might be something worth trying as well. Um, I want to also follow up. Marianne mentioned the HIPAA authorization. We can share with you a supported decision-making document that was created for the state of Missouri about which decisions the person wants to make on their own and which ones they want to get help with. At the very end of that, there is HIPAA release information that I think could be used for this. So, and finally, Marianne, I'm making notes about what you're saying. If you don't want to have all these things in binders, you can certainly store your information on a cloud-based service. And there's one through that Center for Future Planning at the ARC of the US, where you can create all your own documents. The cool thing about that is if you store your documents there, you can choose which sections of those forms you send to supporters. So if you've picked an emergency support team, you can share that information with them via a website. So you don't have to worry about whether they'll find the paper documents that you have. And you could even include a link to that website on your emergency care card. So I think there's actually, I'd probably just put the name of my supporter person on the card or who they should contact. But there are ways to store your information. If you're more comfortable in storing it with paper, I personally would keep one in the car and one at home so that you've got it available when you need it.
And the other thing too, you have to remember to update different things that are in that file, especially the medication list. If there's a change of primary physician, those would be important things to make sure that you're updating. Another thing you could do too, which I don't know, could be like one of those USB ports that you can put the information on a thumb drive, and could even carry that with your keys, as long as you're not a person who normally loses your keys. But anyway, that could be another option.
I think we're talking about a whole lot of different things. So one thing I will remind you is that if this all feels a little bit overwhelming, this would be a great navigation activity. You could pick up the phone, call the St. Louis ARC and ask for a family navigator and say, I'd like to create emergency care plan. Can you support me? And then they could work with you to put the pieces together. So a lot of you are going to just want to run with this on your own, but we can provide additional support if you need it.
So next steps, you could put together a to-go bag that you keep in your car. And that to-go bag could include the fact sheet about you and your family member and that contact card that we talked about, copies of those important documents that we just reviewed, insurance card, healthcare proxy, living will, a DNR if it's applicable. And if you're going to, let's say your family member is with you, you're in an accident, and you're both kind of okay, but yet you have to go to the emergency room, or if you have to be hospitalized, having just some basic toiletries and supplies in there could be good, whether it is something just that you use to clean your glasses, or chapstick, um, having snacks and water for both of you in that bag so that you don't get dehydrated. If sugar level gets low, you have a snack that's right there, and that's one that you like. And other items that you might want to put in there are a spare phone charger. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten someplace and my phone is dying and I don't have a charger. Um, so having that in there is a good thing. Also, maybe even just having some crossword puzzles or a novel in there for you to read, other activities for your family member to do that they're interested in would be helpful to go in that bag too. Then you get stuck, you've got it, no matter how you're getting stuck or where you're getting stuck. You could use that bag for many different opportunities.
I think a lot of times when we talk about this, it seems like too much. Like, why should I have to do this? But I do feel like an emergency is exactly that. It's something that comes on completely unexpectedly. And whether it's a natural disaster or an emergency medical situation or whatever, none of us know when those are going to happen. So if we can do a little bit of planning, I think it can take the anxiety away. And I guess it depends. The more support your family member needs, the more this might be really a priority for you.
Other things that your plan should include, and we've talked a lot about this, and there's uh, places on that letter of intent that you can include some of this information. Um, any kind of physical health information, again, their current medication list for both you and your family member to have those available. Any mental health concerns, whether anxiety, depression, other behaviors that might be challenging, especially if someone has Alzheimer's or onset, where they may be having issues with sundowning, where it gets to be evening time and they're starting to get a little antsy. But what are those things to help your family member or yourself that helps relieve some of that anxiety that might be there? So how the people who are caring for you or your family member, what they can do to help relieve some of those different behaviors that might be showing. Everyday routines, which Sharon talked about in that family, that letter of intent, safety concerns that should be included, whether being in the community, needing support in crossing the street, or if you use a walker in certain situations, or maybe someone uses a walker on a regular basis, but if it's for long distances using a wheelchair, that would be something else that would be important for the person who's supporting your family member, should you not be there to be able to do that. Also, do they need help with the water temperature and adjusting that so that they are safe? And what type of assistance do they need in the shower or in bathing for any type of hygiene care? Finances, I think those are pieces to make sure that whoever is in your circle of support, that if you need help with getting money, that you have somebody that you can feel comfortable doing that with, or who can help out getting money. Insurance cards, having photocopies of both sides is important. We've talked about the legal matters of a living will, advance directives, should those be needed, and interests and lifestyles. What is the routine for your family member? Do they shower in the morning? Do they shower in the evening? What are the activities of interest that they really like to do, whether it's playing cards or watching something specific on TV. Friend of mine, every day it was like watching Jeopardy. That had to be on, and they would do nothing else until that was over, or Wheel of Fortune was another big activity that people like to do that was very routine oriented. And if someone likes to be outside, watching the birds or just getting fresh air, how to best support your family member if you're not there, is a list that you want to make sure that is available in that plan that you're putting together.
I want to just reiterate that you don't have to recreate the wheel. So if you've got a good annual plan through the Department of Mental Health, it may have a good chunk of these items, and you could just attach that with some emergency checklist things for accessing a debit card or something else that you've got squirreled away to take care of something. If you use Charting the Life course tools, you may have some of this information already spelled out in a portfolio. However, this is just sort of a double check for you to make sure, however you've got the information, putting it all together so that it's in one place for people that might have to step in at a moment's notice.
As Sharon said before, if you want help in the future, we can help out by either coming to one of our paper parties and just putting that aside to maybe you don't necessarily need help putting it together, but maybe you just need to schedule the time to do it because we get so busy in our day-to-day life that we are scheduled from the beginning of the morning until the end of the day. So putting that in your calendar, I think we have a paper party once a month or once every other month that you could come and start getting this created or contacting, as Sharon said, a family navigator. Um, would be more than happy to help support you in that endeavor. So we took this information from emergency plans that are crucial for caregivers at agingcare.com.
All right, everybody, thank you so much for your time. It's been great to spend time with you today. Marianne, thanks for all the information, and we'll continue to have this conversation. Thanks, everybody.